Assalamu alaikum everyone. You are listening to episode 30 of the Muhammad Ghailan podcast with yours truly as the host. Before I get going on today's episode, I just want to basically give a general shout out to everybody who's been sharing the episodes, reviewing it on iTunes, giving me comments, feedback. I really do appreciate all of that. It does help out. If you guys go to iTunes and give a rating for the show, give it 5 stars, it elevates it in the podcast rankings, and by doing that, it exposes this work to a greater number of people. So if you're unable to give your financial support, you're unable to give any other forms of support, the least you can do is just go to iTunes. The link is in the description of this episode. You can go there, just give it a 5-star rating if you feel that it deserves it, of course. And spread the word, and that helps this work kind of spread around. If you think there's benefit to it, obviously. The other way for you to support it, if you feel moved to, and it does help out, you can go to andalusonline.org. You can donate directly through there, or you can go to Patreon where you can become a monthly donor, or best way to do it is join Andalus Book Club. I plug this all the time because I think it's a beneficial venue over there. I've got a number of hours of recorded stuff already up there, videos, lessons, things like that, and projects that I'm doing for just the members over there. So I think you'll benefit from it. At any rate, so just to get going on today's stuff, I published an article recently in Imanwire. I'll put the link for it in the description. And the title of it is "What is Power For?" And this article stemmed from a conversation. Well, it's not just one conversation. It's a number of conversations that I've been having over the past while with regards to Muslims engaged in activism, especially in political activism type of work, Muslims interested in politics, and especially from an Islamic perspective, quote-unquote Islamic perspective. And it's aside from the interest, the theoretical interest with regards to how do Muslims govern, what are they looking for, what are they trying to do, and it's just a general question that comes to mind is, if you're trying to use an Islamic ethos, you're trying to guide your behavior based on Islamic understanding of things, what is your metaphysical foundation going to be? First of all, you have to have a clear image or a clear understanding of who you are, what you believe, and what your goals are as a Muslim. Now, if your intention, and the reason you would ask this is because you want to figure out, why are we in the position that we're in today? What happened? A lot of us question, like, what happened? Muslims had the golden age, and I spoke about that in the last episode. We lost that. We lost our interest in science. We lost our political clout, the power that we had. We like to look throughout our history and vicariously live in the shoes of the people who have gone past, rather than live in the present and recognize what it is that we need to do. We're all divided. There is no unity. What's going on? And the Prophet ﷺ had a hadith that is quite telling. It's the Messenger ﷺ, the beloved ﷺ, tells us exactly what our problems are, and we just refuse to listen. We think we know better. And he said that, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is going to come a time when all of the nations are going to come and try to basically eat from you like what are these little bugs that eat wood? Oh man, the name escapes me. But anyways, he said there will be like these little bugs that eat wood, mites, not dust mites. Anyways, they eat the wood up and they destroy a home in that way. And so all of the nations are going to gather around the Muslims and do that. And the companions at the time asked, well, why? Why are we letting them do that? We're united today, we're powerful, we've got all of this, like, why? What's going on? And he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said, well, it's حُبُّ الدُّنْيَا وَكَرَاهِيَةُ الْمَوْتِ. You love this world, you start to love this world in a sick way, and you start to hate dying. Now, when we talk about hating dying, we're not talking about just the natural, everybody's afraid of death. I don't care who you are and what you think. You have to have this trepidation with regards to death. You have to have this fear of death, because even as Muslims, you don't know. لا تزكوا أنفسكم هو أعلم بمن اتقى. You don't know if you're going to heaven or you're going to hell. You have this position as a Muslim where you're like, You have this hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have trust in His grace, you have trust in His mercy, but at the same time you're questioning yourself and you're wondering, like, am I sincere in what I'm doing, or do I have deep problems that I need to address? يوم لا ينفع مال ولا بنون إلا من أتى الله بقلب سليم. On a day that nothing will benefit you, nothing will avail anybody, no children, no wealth, except coming to God with a sound heart. That's what's going to matter. So you spend your time in this world purifying your heart, making sure that you're not doing things for the sake of this world. Now the Messenger ﷺ says that, why did you lose the position? Why would we lose the position? Why will we lose the position that we were in? Why will we not have the ascendancy, for example, in the world? Is because that we start to love the world and we start to hate. Basically, when he says death, we hate the hereafter in a subconscious way. We start to lose track and we start to want to get everything now. Now, if you look at the behavior of the Messenger ﷺ during his time, which is, this idea of the Sunnah being, the Sunnah is not just rituals. It's not just, figure out how many times you need to pray before the obligatory prayers or after, or how many days do you fast, and all of the ritual aspects, as important as they are. But that's not what the Sunnah is, full stop. The Sunnah is more than that. It's bigger than that. It's a worldview. It's a way of looking at the world and approaching the world. And the way to understand that is you have to go back into the biography of the Prophet ﷺ and actually study it with that eye. Not with the eye of, I just want to understand it from, or I just want to read about it to be historically informed, so that when somebody asks me what happened, I can just regurgitate to them, well, this happened and that happened. Rather, what you want to do is, well, the Prophet ﷺ was in this position. This was the offer that was presented to him. These were the implications of it. And this was the route that he took. Now, if you look at political power, was the Prophet ﷺ, a lot of people look at him as, oh, he was a great political leader, and that's the way that he's introduced a lot of times. It's all of the hats that he ﷺ put on, because he was a leader of the Muslim community, so he had to wield his power in different ways. And one of the things that he engaged in was politics. He would send emissaries, he would engage in doing treaties and things like that. So, but if you're thinking about, oh, he was a great political leader, what do we think about when we think about political leaders today? Aside from the negative implications, but like I'm talking about political decision making. What are you looking for? What are you trying to achieve? Typically speaking, you're trying to achieve a temporal goal. You're trying to achieve a goal that is for this world rather than for the next world. You're not really thinking about the next world. Even your conceptions of justice, your conceptions of deal making and all of that stuff, it's all about the here now. You want to benefit your people now, and that's your goal. That's your end goal. That's the end game for you. Now, if you take that and look at, well, what did the Prophet ﷺ do? How did he behave when he's presented with deals that were about utilitarian ideals, for example, benefit versus harm, tit for tat, what are my people going to get out of it? If you look at it from that aspect, temporally, some of the decisions do not appear in the immediate term to be that beneficial. An example of that is Sulh al-Hudaibiya. It's a very famous treatise that I recommend you guys read about, but with the eye of not just being historically informed, but also looking at the implications of it. The story, for those who don't know about it, the story was that the Prophet ﷺ set out, he saw in a dream that he was going to perform the pilgrimage. He was going to perform the minor pilgrimage, Umrah, in Mecca. So he gathered his people, and they told the companions that we're going to Mecca, and they went from Medina. And they didn't take any weapons with them. The only weaponry that they had with them was just enough for the road, because there were brigands and stuff. So they just had their personal swords and stuff, but nothing to conduct warfare with. They were not going on a raid. So they went to Mecca, and Quraysh found out that they were coming, and they told them, you're not allowed to come in, because at the time they were the ones in control of the city. And they wanted to now the Prophet ﷺ at that time, he had gathered power, he became influential in the region. Muslims became a power to reckon with. They couldn't destroy them, and now they've become organized, and now they've got tribes along with their sides and stuff. So when they went to Mecca, Quraysh said, you can't come in. And in fact, they sent out emissaries back and forth, and they started to make a deal with the Prophet ﷺ, because they knew they're not going to stop him forever, but they wanted to assert their supremacy over the Muslims, that we're still the ones in power, and if they come in by force, that's gonna look pretty bad. And at any rate, we're the ones with all the weapons. They're coming to our home and they only have enough weaponry for self-protection on the road. They don't have the preparations to go and attack the city. So he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, engaged in a deal between going back and forth between him and the leaders of Quraysh. Now, if you look at the specifics of the treaty itself that he agreed to, I mean, it was quite an oppressive treatise. Some of the articles that were cited in it were, for example, if somebody escapes from Mecca, a Muslim convert who was, because at the time they were torturing Muslims in Mecca. Anybody that remained behind and hadn't managed to escape and migrate to Medina, they were imprisoned, they were tortured, they were humiliated, all kinds of stuff was going on. And so one of the articles that Quraysh imposed upon the Prophet ﷺ was, if a Muslim escapes from Mecca and goes to Medina, you're obligated to return that person back to us. They can't stay with you. If they're seeking refuge with you, you're not allowed to take them. On the other hand, if someone leaves you and comes to us, we do not have to return them back to you. Secondly, this Umrah that you came all the way from Medina to perform, you don't get to perform it this year. You come back next year and perform it. Now this, among other things, was quite an oppressive thing. If you look at in general, the terms of this treaty between the Prophet ﷺ and Quraysh were for the immediate benefit of Quraysh. From a temporal, political perspective, it's not a good deal for you to agree to. This is not a good deal for you to accept. And that's how the companions of the Prophet ﷺ felt about it. But there was one article that they put in there that was more important to the Prophet ﷺ than all of the other things that were there, which was, we all put down our arms, we no longer have this fighting and raids back and forth. We get to have our trades, because at the time Quraysh was attacking the Muslims, so the Muslims started to basically attack the caravans that were going, because some of their merchandise was being stolen from them. So they would raid the caravans of Quraysh, and Quraysh would raid their caravans. It would go back and forth. There was this back and forth all the time. Now he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in this article would now have a truce, a 10-year truce, where Quraysh doesn't attack us and we don't attack Quraysh anymore, and everybody has a safe passageway, so Mecca can prosper now, financially speaking, and the Muslims can also, aside from the financial aspect, now Muslims are able to go and call people to Islam, spread the message, proselytize, if you will, go and just let people know about Islam without having fear of Quraysh interfering or killing them while they're on their way. So that was important to the Prophet ﷺ. And he accepted the deal because of that one article. The article that guaranteed freedom of calling people to Islam without having Quraysh stop it. That was the important thing. Now the companions initially refused to acknowledge this. They didn't. The Prophet ﷺ, after he accepted this deal and agreed to it, even Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, in the narrations, he didn't even want to write everything down the way that the Prophet ﷺ commanded. He didn't want to erase, because one of the things that they wanted, Quraysh said, the treaty is going to be between Quraysh and the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we're talking about the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Quraysh said, no, we don't accept you as a messenger. If we did, we wouldn't have any of this anyways. Your name is Muhammad ibn Abdullah. And he sallallahu alaihi wasallam instructed Ali radiallahu anhu to erase, just take away the Messenger of Allah. And Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu wouldn't do it. So there was this tension going on between the Prophet ﷺ and the companions, in the sense that they didn't want to be the ones in the inferior position. Ali ibn Abi Talib couldn't get himself to erase the name, and he ﷺ just said, just show me where it is. And he ﷺ by himself, he erased it, he took it off. And when he accepted the deal, the way to break his ihram, his state of going to this minor pilgrimage for Umrah, was he had to slaughter the lamb that he had with him. So he went back, he told the companions, slaughter your lambs, slaughter your sheep, It's all good. We're not going to do it this year. We're going to come back and do it next year. They didn't do it. They didn't say no, but they didn't get up as he commanded them. So he went to his tent, he spoke to his wife, radallahu anha, and she said, just go out and do it. Don't. He was angry with the companions. And he said, they're not listening to me. They're not obeying my command to slaughter their lambs. And she, radallahu anha, just said, go out and don't speak. Don't say anything. Just slaughter the lamb. So that he went out, he slaughtered the lamb, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and all the companions immediately got up and they slaughtered the lambs. But they were still angry about the deal. This deal was quite oppressive from their perspective, because they had this temporal, justice-driven, we have to have parity between Muslims and Quraysh, and we're not in a weak position for us to accept this deal the way that it is. So they didn't see the big picture. On the way back, he ﷺ gets all of a sudden Jibreel coming down with revelation of Surah Al-Fath. Inna fatahna laka fathan mubina. That we certainly have given you a great opening. Now, this opening was not a political opening. This opening was finally the opening he ﷺ needed, not to be distracted by all of these raids and all these fights. And it was the opening he wanted from the very beginning, which was, and he would tell Quraysh this all the time, خَلُّوا بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَ النَّاسِ. Just, okay, fine, you don't want to become a Muslim. I'm not forcing you to. I'm not imposing this religion upon you. But just let me be with the people. Like, why are you stopping the people? It was basically an issue of freedom of speech, if you want to use, as problematic as this is, but just for the sake of bringing the idea closer to you so that you understand what's going on. They were preventing him from speaking to the people, and all he wanted was, just let me speak. Just let me call people to this religion. Fine, you can keep telling people whatever you want to tell them about it, but also give me the opportunity to speak. Let me offer them what I have to offer. That year, this surah was indicative, and later on, I believe it was Umar al-Khattab radhiyallahu anhu, reflecting back on what was going on at the time, and he said, none of us saw it. None of us saw the impact of this. This treaty allowed us to finally call people to Islam, and it's because of this treaty we had tribes upon tribes, thousands of people entering into Islam. The number of Muslims grew to a degree that it was unprecedented before. The rate of conversion was huge, and the only difference was they finally were able to go and speak to the people now. That's all he wanted. So if you look at the political function of the Treaty of Hudaibiya, the political function of it was not so much that the Prophet ﷺ could have power, or it wasn't the calculus wasn't power. The calculus was, do I have the ability to call people to Allah? That was the calculus for the Prophet ﷺ. That was the important thing. Afterwards, once people accept all of that stuff, the thing in the Islamic perspective, the metaphysical worldview is a reflection of, the material world, the material manifestation of the world is a reflection of your metaphysical worldview. So if you want to talk about the Islamic golden age, you want to talk about Muslims in justice and the utopic ideal of Medina, and again, problematic use of terms to project onto the past, but just to get the idea closer to you guys. The city of the Prophet ﷺ, the time of the Prophet ﷺ is the time that we consider to be the best of times. And we're not talking about a utopia, because people still had their problems, people had their issues. There weren't angels and saints, all of them walking on the earth. Everybody, there was the alcoholics, there were the adulterers, there were people having their shit. They were human beings. Companions nevertheless. And when we say companions, we're recognizing that we're dealing with people that were selected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And in all of their different manifestations, in all of their different levels of piety, and in all of their different personality levels, we have lessons for us to derive from. Now, and they were raised by the Prophet ﷺ and spiritually purified by the Prophet ﷺ to become the people that they became. And so we have lessons to see in them so that we can benefit from their time. But it wasn't the utopia that people think that, angels walking on earth. That wasn't the case. But in looking at how they manifested, there was a worldview. Their sense of justice was not the same as our sense of justice. Our sense of justice today is very limited. We live in a materialistic world. We live in a time right now where when we speak about reality, when people say the term reality, what is real, oftentimes what they're saying is just the material existence. They're not even considering the ghaib, which is the first thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us after Surah Al-Fatiha. When we ask for guidance, what does He say? He describes the believers as, in Surah Al-Baqarah, الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ, those who actually believe in the unseen. It's not about faith, it's about recognizing that there is something greater than what you got going on over here. So looking at that, and that was all of this is just a preamble basically to what was the article about, this what is power for us, to recognize that from a Muslim perspective, all of these debates about Islamist and Caliphate and all of that stuff, people that really clamor up and they just want to, it feels like they can't talk about anything else but figuring out how to become politically powerful. Well, what's your purpose behind it? Why are you doing this? Now, what I said in the article, that the only thing mentioned in the Quran, if you think about like what is the position of the Muslims today, you can look at something like the statement of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, who said that we are a people who were ennobled by God through Islam. نحن قوم أعزنا الله بالإسلام فإن ابتغينا العزة في غيره أذلنا الله. And if we seek nobility in anything other than it, then God will debase us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, لا يغير الله ما بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم, that God does not change the state, the external manifestation of how you are until you change your internal state. And your internal state is going to be based on what you believe about the ghaib, about the unseen. What is your metaphysical position? Now, the only thing in the Quran that's mentioned to receive unequivocal safeguarding and support from God is the Quran itself. إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. Truly, certainly, surely, we have brought down this reminder, and it is certainly we who will safeguard it. And by extension, when we talk about safeguarding the Quran, that automatically implies that the message, so the Prophet ﷺ Sunnah, is also not going to be distorted. The ancillary disciplines that serve them, so the Arabic language, the Hadith sciences, the rhetoric, anything you think of that is related to sacred knowledge, all of that is going to be safeguarded. That's not to say that you're not going to have corrupt scholars and things like that. Of course, you're going to have all of that stuff, but it's just the idea that the religion itself is safeguarded, regardless of what the people do. Because when it was left to the people, that's when things became corrupted. Now, in the midst of all of this Muslim activism, because really the thing you have to keep in mind when it comes to Muslims as a people, God's support is absolutely conditional. And His promised merchandise is expensive. The Prophet ﷺ said, أَلَا إِنَّ سِلْعَةَ اللَّهِ لَغَالِيَةٌ. The merchandise of Allah, the merchandise of God is expensive. It's not cheap for you to get the support of God. Now, in the midst of all of this Muslim activism and political engagements is this critical question that has to be answered with crystal clarity. And it's a difficult question to ask and a difficult question to recognize the answer to. And a lot of people don't feel comfortable with the answer. Why are we in the precarious position that we find ourselves in? Because it's easy for us to dismiss the spiritual as abstract and materially intangible. I mean, people talk about being woke, and that has social currency. If you're woke, you recognize all of the different structural oppressive things that are going on and stuff. But again, what is all of this about? Why is it the way that it is? If you recognize that the one in control ultimately is God, and the land is God's, and power is God's, and all of these things are being allotted to people depending on their station with God, without having an internal firm foundation for us that is rooted, for Muslims, rooted in Islamic principles. And the thing about Islam, this is a religion. If you look at the Quran, in a couple of places Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rebukes sectarianism. You know, كل حزب بما لديهم فرحون. Every sect is joyous with what they have. And حزب, تحزب, it's like, and فرحون, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the state, this, you know, it's a joyous state, it's an emotional state. You're not a rational person. Once you become a Muslim, the very first thing you have to reject is sectarianism. You have to say, leave it behind. Tribalism, you gotta leave it behind. It's basically the religion that part of it is to get you to transcend your sectarian or tribalistic allegiances. In a way, some people like to think of religion as, oh, it's just another tribe thing. In fact, Islam is calling you to transcend this tribalism in a way where somebody being Muslim is irrelevant to you if they're being oppressive, if they're doing wrong, because you are serving greater ideals. You're after greater ideals because your concern is God's opinion, not the people's opinion, and not your sect's opinion. None of these external accolades, you know, if you get into all of this activism stuff, if you don't have this internal foundation that's rooted in Islamic principles set right, the external accolades, they mean nothing, and they won't really matter in the long run. And if our primary goal is articulated based on a temporal sense of justice rather than a transcendent divine one, then we must recognize, and this is hard for people to swallow, but we have to recognize that God's religion and the beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam are too noble to have us Muslims in a position of power that we would then falsely claim to wield in their name. We're not that special, and God is not in need of us. Back to this Hudaibiya treaties and what happened. Abu Sufyan ibn Harb radiallahu anhu, he was not always a companion of the Prophet ﷺ. He gathered, and just to tell you a little bit about what Abu Sufyan did with the Prophet ﷺ, he gathered 3,000 fighters and he led them against Muslims in the Battle of Uhud to seek revenge over the loss that Meccans had endured at the Battle of Badr. And after the death of Abu Jahl at Badr, Abu Sufyan became the leader of Quraysh, and he vowed to continue the fight against the beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam with any means he saw fit. So he was using military force, he was using propaganda, he was using anything he could use to basically try to destroy the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims. And he followed up his victory at Uhud with leading a 10,000 man strong army to Medina at the Battle of the Trench, Ghazwatul Ahzab, or Ghazwatul Khandaq is another name for it, where they blockaded the city and starved Muslims for 3 weeks in what ultimately was a failed attempt to massacre them. When he was not leading these battles against Muslims, he ensured the continuation of imprisonment and torture of anyone who converted to Islam in Mecca. This guy was a tyrant. He wasn't just a leader of forces against the beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was like a symbol of evil and oppression wherever he was. Now in the 8th year after the beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam's migration from Mecca to Medina, this Treaty of Hudaibiya that I mentioned at the beginning, at the top of the episode, Quraysh broke the terms. There was an incident that happened by one of the tribes, somebody from one of the tribes that they were allied with. He killed somebody from another tribe that the Prophet ﷺ was allied with, and that broke the terms of that treaty. Now at this point, the beloved ﷺ's power grew to a point that Quraysh could not face anymore. They couldn't handle him. And now he had the support of following of surrounding tribes. So he ﷺ led, and this is kind of like an ironic twist of history from Quraysh's perspective. You know, 8 years ago you took a 10,000 man strong army, and you led it to come and to try to massacre and eviscerate the Muslims in Medina. But now look, 8 years later, the Prophet ﷺ is coming back at you with a 10,000 man strong army from the tribes that you had gathered before, and now they are with the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they're coming to you. I mean, if you think about that, that's crazy. Just the twists and turns of history and how the hands can be turned. Now he sallallahu alaihi wasallam comes to Mecca, He didn't starve anybody. He didn't blockade the city. He just comes in. There was a couple of minor skirmishes that took place, but the city surrendered without much resistance. And after a long career of fighting the beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam and persecuting the Muslims whenever he had the opportunity, Abu Sufyan and his people were now under the mercy of the beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now when Muslims took over Mecca, its inhabitants assumed the worst. And after more than 20 years of what they had done to them when they were in power, they expected payback. I mean, if you think about it, it's been a long time, man. And now it's time for payback. You've been torturing us. You've taken our wealth. You've expelled us from our land. You've killed our children. You've killed our husbands. You've killed our wives. You've done all of these things. We want to talk about torture. There were some horrendous things that took place, and the Meccans were involved in this. So they expected payback. Now the beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam declared unto them that whoever remained, as when they were going into Mecca, he said to them, whoever remained in their home, so as long as you guys don't resist, don't come and fight, you're safe. If you stay at home, you're safe. If you're at the haram, at the sanctuary by the Kaaba, you're safe. Nothing's going to happen to you. And then he said, and this is like even more significant, anybody who stays in Abu Sufyan's house, so your leader, the symbol of evil, the one who fought me and tried to kill me and done all of these things and propaganda against us and all that, if you stay at his house, that's also a safe zone. Man kana fi dari Abi Sufyan fahuwa amin. Now, this, of course, like everybody was just pleased with that. But after the initial hours of panic and confusion subsided, he sallallahu alaihi wasallam called the Meccans and he said, all right, everybody come to the Kaaba. We got to have a chat about this. We need to see what's going on. Everybody gather around. So all the Meccans came and gathered by the Kaaba. And as they're all gathering, he sallallahu alaihi wasallam steps up and by the Kaaba and he asks what they thought he would do with them. ما ترون أني فاعل بكم اليوم. They replied, أخ كريم وابن أخ كريم. You are a noble brother and the son of a noble brother. He sallallahu alayhi wasallam said to them what Yusuf alayhi salam said to his brethren, as narrated, as related in Surah Yusuf. لا تثريب عليكم اليوم غفر الله لكم. There is no blame on you today. May God forgive you. So after all of these years of torture, of persecution, of expulsion, of fighting, of killing, of propaganda, of all of that stuff, now you're under my mercy, you're under my power. What do you think I'm going to do with you? I'm going to forgive you, and I'm going to ask God to forgive you, and even tell you there's no blame on you. I understand. I mean, you want to talk about being in a position of power and what you can do with that. He sallallahu alayhi wasallam wiped their slate clean. You got nothing to worry about anymore. It's done. Bygones be bygones. It's fine. This event from the life of the beloved sallallahu alayhi wasallam poses a question for Muslims today. And this question, I think about this question a lot, personally. And every time I think about this question and reflect, because alhamdulillah, I've traveled around, I've done a bit of community work, I've engaged with Muslims quite a bit, stuff, and I don't want this to come across as like giving up on Muslims or like in a negative way, but the answer that comes to my mind is a difficult answer to contemplate, but it is the only answer that I can be honest with myself and think that's the answer. And I say it in a lamenting way, and I say it in a very, it's heartbreaking for me. And I pray that we can be better. But the question that I ask is, should the tables, and this is a question for you guys to even contemplate, should the tables be turned in a place like Palestine? And we all know what's going on in Palestine. We all know what's happening. We know what the Israelis are doing. We know what Netanyahu is doing. We know all of that stuff. We don't have to keep repeating the specific details because it's clear. It's a place of total oppression. The Palestinians are undergoing torture and undergoing a lot of evil things, and the blockade on Gaza and everything that's going on. But I want you to reflect back on the time of the Prophet ﷺ and think about it from a prophetic perspective. Because whatever Muslims have gone through back then, what we see today, don't think you're special or it's more evil. At best, you're seeing similar things. But how did the Prophet ﷺ respond? The question I ask myself is, should the tables be turned in a place like Palestine, for example? What will we do? Seriously, take a second and think about that. What will Muslims do? And be honest with the answer. How would Muslims, if Muslims took over and became the powerful force in Palestine, they took over Israel, what's known as Israel now, and the Israelis became under the power of Muslims, what are Muslims going to do? We know that when it comes to having power and dominion in this world, despite any illusions we may have to the contrary, that it is a matter solely for God to grant to anyone He wishes. قل اللهم مالك الملك تؤتي الملك من تشاء وتنزع الملك ممن تشاء وتعز من تشاء وتذل من تشاء بيدك الخير إنك على كل شيء قدير. Say, O God, Master of the kingdom, you grant the kingdom to whomsoever you please, and take it away from whomsoever you please. You exalt whomsoever you please, and abase whomsoever you please. In your hand is the good. Surely you have power over all things. In other words, what we have to think about, again, material is a manifestation of the immaterial. Your metaphysical foundation manifests a reality, a material reality in front of you. Power dynamics in that piece of land in the world today, in Palestine, or anywhere in the world for that matter, are not the way they are because of US support or advanced weaponry or nuclear weapons or what have you. All of these things are just, these are the fingers that we have confused for the moon they are pointing to. One of the most prominent historical figures Muslims know of, and the world even knows of, is Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. And his magnanimous actions in generous terms granted to his enemies after he liberated Jerusalem in 1187 from the Crusaders are widely known. It's even been depicted in movies. You look at Kingdom of Heaven, for example. What is not as popularly acknowledged about Salahuddin is that aside from the Quran, the other book he always carried with him was Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali's Ihya Ulum ad-Din, Revivification of the Religious Sciences. It is interesting to note that one of the criticisms leveled against Imam al-Ghazali was his apparent lack of concern with Jerusalem in his writings, which during his time had fallen to the Crusaders. That's an interesting thing. MashaAllah, Imam al-Ghazali's influence on spirituality and on law and all of these things, he wrote a lot. He was a prolific writer. And he went to Jerusalem and he knew what was going on, but searched throughout all of his writings. No mention of Jerusalem. He doesn't call the Muslims, hey Muslims, pick up your arms and go and fight and liberate and do, none of that. Oh, go for jihad and let's do, none of that. He doesn't do any of that. And so one of the criticisms that his contemporaries and ones after him have against Imam al-Ghazali, and this is where this criticism of, oh look at Sufism is this pacifist thing that basically it's the reason why Muslims lost their position in the world and things like that. It's all silliness. There was something deeper that Imam al-Ghazali was dealing with, because as history would show, Imam al-Ghazali's writings and his work were dealing with the deep problem that led Muslims to lose Jerusalem in the first place. It's one thing for you to go to a doctor, for example, and you have a headache for a month straight. You've never had it before, starting off, and you have this headache, and this headache doesn't want to go away. Or you have a pain in your shin, and it doesn't go away, and you've never had it before. It's kind of tweaking a little bit, and you go to the doctor, and the doctor says, just pain, oh fine, let's just give you some opiates. let's give you some, not even opiates, let's start with something small. Or you go to the, just go to the pharmacist and get yourself some extra strength Tylenol and that's it. Or Advil, and it's done. Ibuprofen, it's all good. And you just take that, not recognizing that this could be pointing to a deeper problem, that you might have cancer. And if you don't catch it right away, it will kill you. He, radiallahu anhu, rahimahullah, Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, was looking at Muslims and looking at, you lost Jerusalem? That is a problem, that is a material problem stemming from a metaphysical issue, because dominion is God's. And you lost this dominion because God doesn't see you fit to have it. Because remember, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمُ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ. So, we have made you into a middle nation. So that why? You become witnesses upon the people. You testify upon the people. وَيَكُونَ الرَّسُولُ عَلَيْكُمْ شَهِيدًا. And the Prophet ﷺ, so the path of the Prophet ﷺ, the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ will testify against you. So if you're not on the up and up, you're not on the straight and narrow, you'll know it. And once you're not in that position, you cannot take on the position of being testifiers and witnesses upon the people. This is an interesting thing and a significant thing to pay attention to. Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali put together the spiritual recipe that was an important factor contributing to how Salah ad-Din was shaped into a figure worthy of divine facilitation. That was what made his behavior when he triumphed prophetic. The public discourse on the conditions of Muslims today and relationship between Islam and modernity seeks to find its answers in the calls to reform, quote unquote, reform the religion. We always talk about, oh, look at this religion, it's we don't have the answers to this, we need to fix that, we need to have debates about the fiqh of that, the people were living in a different time back then. It's fine, I'm not saying there's no need whatsoever to revisit some issues and stuff, that's not the issue here, but the issue here, we keep projecting our internal problems and thinking that everything that we need to fix is external. But the Quranic recipe says it's not external. You gotta fix your own self first before your external conditions can improve. It's all this outward focus misses the mark. And being a Muslim is really a responsibility for you to be woke, but not in the way that being woke is being limited. When people are being woke and they recognize all of these different structural racism and structural discrimination and implicit biases and this and that, and they start to point out all of these different things and they get really good at it and it's quite impressive. But then you ask them about their own condition, your own internal state. Figure out what's wrong with your own heart, with your own spiritual state. Most people are unable to reflect on that and say anything about it. Our first responsibility as Muslims is to be woke to our own self, in terms of the self. Like Imam al-Raghib al-Asfahani, he mentioned in his Ad-Dhari'a, what is Ad-Dhari'a li-Ahkam al-Sharia? It's a text on expounding on the ethics of on Islamic ethics, and it's actually the text that Ad-Dhari'a ila Makarim al-Sharia is the title of the text. The supporting guide to the noble aspects of the Sharia. And in it he identifies the enemies of man. What are the enemies of mankind? And it's 4 of them. Nafs, hawa, shaitan, and dunya. Your ego, your whim, demonic inspirations, and the worldly aspect of this life. The one that makes you think that you're here forever. The one that makes you believe that this is all you got and you need to get everything while you can before you die. Unless we understand how to battle the first 3, which is your ego, your women, your demons, we will continue to experience deterioration of our worldly status. The world is the way that it is as a result of how well we are doing in our battles against the first 3 enemies. And it is an apparent manifestation of events that take place in the unseen world. And after the tashahhud in the prayer, when you say ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna muhammadan rasulullah, and then in the some of the du'as that unfortunately many of us we don't read and remember and reflect on with presence. وأشهد أن الجنة حق وأن النار حق وأن الساعة حق وأن الساعة آتية لا ريب فيها, that you believe that heaven is real, the hell is real, that the hour is coming and there's no doubt about that. You have to have this conception of reality in its totality, not in this ephemeral thing that's going to go away, which we're being told from a quantum physics perspective anyways, that it's not even the way that its reality is not the way that it appears to you. You have to have a bigger picture and a bigger understanding. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس, that corruption has become manifest in the land and in the seas because of what people have been earning. So your spiritual, your metaphysical state is crucial and is totally dependent, and it's the foundation of how you find yourself in this position that you're in. Now, the idea here is that you have to respond to a divine call. Before you respond to the call of social justice, to activism, all of these things, politics. It's interesting. The Prophet ﷺ, when he had Musaylam al-Kadhab towards the end of his life, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, in this world, Musaylam al-Kadhab claimed to be a prophet, and he sent an emissary to the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, telling him that, hey, listen, I received revelation just like you received revelation. Let's split the land. Because to him, he was thinking about messenger, good deal. I can now have control over some things. I can be a ruler. Because look at the Prophet, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He runs the show, I can run the show. Let's split the land between each other. And so he had this large tribe behind him, and he figured, hey, I can fight him for it, basically. So I can claim to be a prophet, I can claim to be a messenger. He came with his own kind of claim to be a revelation and inspirations, and he had his own type of quote-unquote Quran, and so he was trying to say that. Now, what was the Prophet ﷺ's response to him? He didn't even say to the companions right away, like, oh, gather the armies, let's go and take over. إِنَّ الْأَرْضَ لِلَّهِ يُورِثُهَا لِمَن يَشَاءُ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. He responded back to them, to Musaylama, after he took the parchment that was sent with the letter, and he told the writer, his writer, just flip it and write, this land is God's, it's not mine for me to split with you. This assumption that you have that it's mine, that's a problem in itself. It's not mine, it's God's. إِنَّ الْأَرْضَ لِلَّهِ يُورِثُهَا لِمَن يَشَاءُ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ. He grants it, He inherits it to whomever He pleases from His servants. وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. And the hereafter is for the aware, the pious, the conscious of God. That's who it's going to go to. Before you get anything in this world, before you are granted things, you have to first, Muslims were in the position that they were in the past because from a material perspective, they were manifesting at the grand scheme of things, at the ummah level, what Abdul Rahman ibn Auf did at the individual level. What did Abdul Rahman ibn Auf do? When he left Mecca, the way he left Mecca, and he was rich, he was really rich, and if you look through his biography, it's amazing how much money, forget about Bill Gates and all of these guys. He was rich, and in the real tangible sense, gold, silver, land, property, gardens, things like that. So he was really rich. For him to leave Mecca, he had to actually surrender all of his property. He told the Meccans, listen, let me go, because they were holding back any converts. They didn't want anybody to leave, and they wanted to torture them to get them to leave Islam. When it comes to Abdul Rahman ibn Auf, first of all, he was a noble person. He was from the aristocratic clan. And then he told them, listen, take my money, take my property, take all of the stuff that you want, just let me go. And they said, fine, if you're going to give us all, let's go, again, greed. So they looked at his wealth and they said, great, good deal. See ya, take off. So he went to Medina. And when he got there, just with the clothes on his back, basically, he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, made a prayer for him. And he said, May Allah basically turn everything you touch into gold is the implication of the dua. So that's actually what happened with Abdurrahman ibn Auf. And the thing with Abdurrahman ibn Auf, whenever he was asked, same thing with Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, same thing with Uthman bin Affan, with Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, all of these companions, they got to the positions that they got to because dunya, this worldly aspect, this thing that makes you think that, you're going to be down and out and have nothing left, it wasn't in their hearts. When push came to shove and they had to surrender, they said, fine, take it, I don't care. It's all good. God is the provider. If you behave in the world, if you live throughout the world with an understanding and a conviction that the one who created you didn't forget about giving you, about providing for you, about granting you things that you need to live in this world, if you have this conviction, none of this stuff will matter to you. So land, power, who cares? I don't care. As long as in the grand scheme of things, let thy will be done, that you have this total submission and surrender to the divine, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will. You work. That's not to say that you sit on your back and do nothing, lie on your back and do nothing and not work. But you have to have this metaphysical understanding, this detachment from the world. Because لَمْ تَسَعْنِ السَّمَاوَاتُ وَالْأَرْضِ, as in the Hadith Qudsi, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the heavens and the earth could not encompass me. وَلَكِنْ وَسِعَنِي قَلْبُ عَبْدِي, but the heart of my servant is the one thing that could encompass me. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God Almighty, doesn't share the heart of the believer. If your heart has things in it that are not supposed to be there, and you think that you can gather love of this world with love of God, you got another thing coming. You got a big problem. So you work, but you don't attach yourself to the results. You try to attain things so that they can remain in your hand, but you don't have them in your heart. That's why in the Quran Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. You're not going to attain excellence, this spiritual state of excellence, of nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to God Almighty, until you spend from that which you love. You have to let it go. And what's amazing about this is there are lessons in this. I mean, we see it in the world. You look at people like these major celebrities that just give and give and give and give and give, and they just, and you see it with people that they interview, that they come on in these like little special episodes and stuff, and you watch like when they start giving things. It just seems to be the case that the more people are less attached to worldly things, the more that they attain from it. The more they have. It's amazing to see. The less attached they are to it, the more that they have it. The less covetous that they are, the more that they attain. And at the end of the day, you're not being less covetous so that you can covet, but you're just recognizing what is important in this world and what is not. If you use yourself, that's why there's a hadith, Allahumma istakhdimna wa la tastabdilna. God, please utilize us, use us in your service, and do not exchange us for somebody else. So, what is power for? What is money for? What is all of these things for? What are they all about? If you're not having a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you're recognizing that, if you happen to lose something, it's fine, whatever. And if you get it, it's okay too. It's a responsibility. It kind of sucks. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu was having a lot of trouble with it because he just hated that type of responsibility. He was so worried about it that if a donkey would trip in Iraq, he was concerned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would question him about the donkey and what do you do about it? So when you engage, the purpose of this, and we're just coming to an end here, the purpose of this is just to give you a reminder, especially for the young crowd, young Muslim brothers and sisters who are getting active and engaged in a lot of social activism and things like that, and social justice work, engaged in political stuff, those who are interested in becoming politically active, interested in entering into politics. You have to have this constant reminder running in your mind that power, dominion is God's. whoever gets it is God's decision, not yours. Don't get yourself too attached to these things, and work based on principles that adhere, that are founded, rooted upon Islamic ethos. What are these Islamic ethos? This is another discussion, but we're talking about wisdom, we're talking about justice, we're talking about mercy, we're talking about benefit. Generally the Sharia itself, just as to finish off, Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya, rahimahullah, when he commented on what the Sharia is, what is all of this rooted on? What is Islam rooted on? If you want to explain it in a single sentence, so الشريعة حكمة كلها ورحمة كلها وعدل كلها ومصلحة كلها. That all of the Sharia, all of Islam, is rooted on, it's based on the principles of justice, mercy, benefit, and wisdom. And then he said, whatever goes against any of these things, anything that you see, that you hear about from an Islamic perspective, that people tell you, Islam says this, whoever this Islam guy is, but somebody tries to convince you that this is based on Islam, and you find that the action is going to result in injustice, result in frivolity as opposed to wisdom, result in oppression as opposed to justice, result in torture, and result in having people not having mercy. He said, ليست من الشريعة في شيء. This particular thing is no longer part of the Sharia. وَإِنْ أُدْخِلَتْ فِيهَا بِالتَّأْوِيلِ. Even if it's been brought into it using some interesting type of interpretive methods, even if they try to quote the Quran and quote the Hadith, if you find that the result of the behavior is going to be against justice, mercy, benefit, and wisdom, then know that it's not from Islam, no matter what they say. So you have this ethos, and you have to study, you have to connect yourself with teachers so that they can check you, you check yourself, because there's nothing like a teacher who can observe you and look at what you're doing and see negative changes that might be happening to you, so that they can remind you to go back on, to get back on track, because it's really easy for us to lose track of where we're going and get too delve too deeply to a degree where we lose track of ourselves. I think I'll leave it at that, guys, for this episode. Just as a short commentary on that article that I wrote. Just another reminder, all of the ways that you guys can contact me and connect with me. You got Twitter at Muhammad Ghailan. You can do it through Facebook. I think the Facebook address is Dr. Muhammad Ghailan, but it's just the page there. You can contact me through andalusonline.org. And yeah, man, if you guys can just do me a favor, I'd really appreciate it. Share the episode. Mention me on Twitter when you share it so that I can reshare it. Also, if you're on YouTube, like this video and subscribe. I'd really appreciate that. And what else, man? Yeah, you can support it. Like I said, you can rate this episode on iTunes. It takes you like 2 seconds. Link is in the description. Just go give it a rating. And if you can support this through financial means, I'd really appreciate that. It helps pay the bills to keep this going. You can do that either through one-time direct donation at andalusonline.org, or you can do it through Patreon. Become a patron at patreon.com/Muhammad Ghailan, and you can join Andalus Book Club, where we are discussing Technopoly by Neil Postman at the moment. I think I'll leave it at that, guys. I will see you inshallah next time. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.